Republicans gut John Kasich's budget.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Laura Bischoff, State House reporter for the Dayton Daily News. Jim Siegel, State House reporter, the Columbus Dispatch. Brian Rothenberg, director of Progress Ohio. And Mark Weaver, Republican strategist.
I guess we all knew it was coming, but when it happened, when the GOP-controlled House turned speculation into an actual budget document, it was pretty stunning. House Republicans took their own governor's major initiatives and basically tossed them in the basket. Let's start with the Medicaid fight. The House budget would kill Governor Kasich's plan to expand Medicaid to 275,000 low-income Ohioans. The House said no to $13 billion coming from the federal government. Opponents argue the money only adds to the federal deficit, but the governor is not giving up.
They're only going to be able to give money by further indebting our kids. My kids. I have 3 kids. They're 8, 5, and 2. Little kids. And they're going to have to live with an even larger debt burden.
I couldn't state my position any clearer on this. And, I'm going to continue to do everything I can to fight for it in a constructive way. I want Ohio tax dollars to come back here to deal with Ohio's problems.
Mark Weaver, is the House budget based on sound fiscal and healthcare policy, or is it just a gut opposition to the president's healthcare plan?
Well, it's probably both, and politics intrudes on everything we do in the State House. I think the governor's got a smart idea here. Remember, this is really a conservative idea. The most conservative governor in the country from Arizona, Jan Brewer, she's doing this for her state, and it makes a lot of sense cost-wise. So many conservatives, though, have somehow mixed this up with Obamacare, which really has very little to do with. And as a result, I think this is not over. I think you'll see more efforts in the legislature to come back and find a way to help Ohio expand Medicaid in this way.
So why was it in the budget? Should he have put it separate? Because there's talk now that it will go into a separate piece of legislation. Democrats have proposed that.
I mean, I think it should have been in the budget. I think the problem is the governor really didn't, there didn't appear to be, on both this and tax, as much effort to try to do pre-work with the legislature and trying to get this done. I think it's going to wind up in there. I mean, there's 250,000 Ohioans' lives at stake here. But I think that the real problem here had to do with leadership and the type of work you do. And in the end, the governor's going to have to get more engaged to do some arm twisting and get his votes. And it might take some Democratic votes. We'll have to see. It's
appropriate to be in the budget for sure. I mean, this is a $19 billion program when you add in the state and the federally funded stuff, and also without the Medicaid expansion, it's going to blow about a $400 million hole in the budget plan that Kasich had laid out. So they're going to, they're trying to rejigger everything and figure out how to patch it together.
I mean, the hospitals today testified, and it was kind of a telling debate right there. The hospitals are saying, look, the federal government under the Affordable Care Act cut our reimbursement rates for uncompensated care. And in exchange, they said, okay, we're going to do that, but we're going to give you a Medicaid expansion, so you'll kind of get the money back on the other end. So what they're arguing is, look, we're going to lose like $7 billion over the next 10 years if you don't also do the Medicaid expansion on top of this. And Republicans on the panel, in this case it was Representative Ron Magg, pushed back and said, but look, every time we get all this money we'd be getting, I think he said 46 cents of it would be coming from China and other places because we're borrowing it. And that's sort of the philosophical divide right now. Unfortunately, I think what ends up happening is you end up with these folks who aren't covered, and you have the House budget which spends $334 million more in state money and $2.1 billion less in federal money. And I think that is going to raise some eyebrows.
Is this the fear, Mark, of the Tea Party? We saw the Tea Party person in the soundbite. Are they really afraid? Are legislators afraid of primary fights? Should they sign on to this?
I think there is some concern about that, but it looks very politically back home for these legislators than it does in the State House. In many of these counties, particularly smaller and medium-sized counties, there are community hospitals that are on the edge that will cut back on care and services if this doesn't happen. And when these legislators are home, they're hearing that from the people who work at the hospitals, people on the board, people who rely on the care. I think there's a lot more play left in this issue.
Yeah, the Kasich administration thinks there's a majority of legislators who would vote for this. Unfortunately, there isn't a majority of Republicans right now who would vote for this. He would have to take all the Democratic votes and add them in with about half of the Republican votes and try to get that done, possibly separately. I don't know. I think even Speaker Batchelder said he thinks he's got 20 members who would go along. That would give them plenty for a majority. In the Senate, I'm told there aren't more than a handful of Senate Republicans right now on board with this. That may take more work.
They would need 7 Republican senators to flip to, assuming all the Democrats vote for it. Do we have 7 senators?
Well, we should. We definitely should. And I got to point this out. Where is the Tea Party army? Because I got to tell you, there were 2,500 people on the state lawn in front of the State House, and you don't see these Republican legislators like looking around saying, "Hey, you know, there's this groundswell of people upset." They are talking about this Tea Party revolution that doesn't really exist on paper.
Well, the Tea Party has a point in that our federal government finances are really messed up, and they have rightful anger at the Obama administration in Washington. But governors like John Kasich, who are trying to balance their budgets, which they have to do by law, and trying to meet state needs, have to deal with the reality that this is the Washington we have, and I think that's where they've gone astray.
There is a proposal to ask the federal government for the $13 billion to then use it to buy private insurance, or allow those folks who would qualify, the 275,000 folks who would qualify, to buy private insurance. Does that have any chance of happening?
It's possible. That is one of the most of the legislators I've talked to are not familiar enough with that yet, because this got yanked out and they didn't get a good chance to get briefed on the alternatives. But I've also talked to the hospitals and doctors associations. They seem to be, in concept, okay with it. They too want to see some details, but that could be an alternative idea that might kind of get them where they want to go.
But the Obama administration would have to sign off on that,
Exactly.
correct? And is that, Laura, they've seemed resistant to change their plan so far.
Right, and I think there was a coalition of Republican governors who kind of wanted to do Medicaid expansion light, and the Obama administration said no to that. So there isn't any certainty about whether or not they can reshape and craft, what works, what they want just for Ohio.
All right. Okay, the other big area of disagreement was taxes. The House rejected most of the plan proposed by the governor. John Kasich wants a 20% income tax spread over 3 years. The House plan only cuts the income tax by 7% in just 1 year. The governor wants to cut the small business tax in half. The House said no. Kasich wants to cut the sales tax by a half percentage point, but the House would keep it where it is. To pay for all of his cuts, John Kasich wants to impose sales taxes on many services. The House said no to that, and the governor would impose a tax on oil and natural gas drillers, and the House didn't like that idea either. Jim Siegel, to Brian Rothenberg's point, didn't these folks talk to each other before the budget was presented by the governor?
No. Yeah, they didn't, and that's part of the issue of all this. They really did not talk much, and they didn't get the buy-in. The governor didn't get the buy-in. The legislature didn't. They didn't have time to kind of work through this in their own minds. So yeah, now here we're left with the 7% cut. It's about $1.5 billion over the 2-year budget. It would actually go retroactive back to January of this year. So we're talking about a much smaller cut. I mean, the average Ohioan in this state, actually not even average, the vast majority of Ohioans would see less than $200 a year in tax breaks under a 7% cut. Senate President Keith Faber has already said that's not enough. That's not really going to move the needle. He's talking about shifting it over to completely a business tax cut, but there's criticisms with that as well. It's from arguing that the business tax cut doesn't do enough for any individual business to really allow them to do any additional hiring.
They're really, I think Jim's right. Most Ohioans, when we got the 21% across the board cut that was phased in over 5 or 6 years, a couple of years ago, the polls showed most people didn't even notice that they got it. And I think a 7% is really not going to move. It's certainly not going to catch anybody's attention. And some of the people on the far right are saying, it's going to be it's too small to really make any kind of a splash.
Well, it is. The Senate President actually pretty much said it was ineffective, and the reason is this: at the lowest end, if you're really poor, you get $11. You get to go to McDonald's. If you're sort of in that middle class area, you get about $51. I'm citing a Columbus Dispatch piece. So I guess maybe you get to go to a nicer restaurant like a Bob Evans for a family of 4. But if you're making over $250,000 a year, you get to go to Hawaii. You get $1,800.
I mean, this is the most taxes, though, and that's the nature of a proportional tax payment system.
Well, that's the problem.
When
with
you
income
pay
tax.
more, if there's a cut, you get more. Listen, I'd be great with a flat tax where everybody pays the same tax, but the notion of somehow decrying people who are getting a bigger tax break when they're paying more seems fundamentally unfair.
So if there is going to be a tax cut, whatever the size, how are you going to pay for it if you don't expand the sales tax, or you don't tax the oil and natural gas drillers, and you don't take the Medicaid money, which was coming as well?
How did they pay for this? It was one-time only money. They're basically using bond funds. And this is the same governor in 2010 that was screaming and yelling about Ted Strickland using one-time only money. So here we are now, and it's one-time only money again, and that's going to create a dilemma.
He had the sales tax expansion, which was going to bring in not all of the money to pay for this, but a good portion of it, though.
But it puts him in a box.
Well, Ohio's getting some pretty good tax revenue growth right now as we're emerging out of the Great Recession. And we've had pretty conservative spending budgets, particularly the current 2-year budget. So we're left with $400 million plus out of this budget that they could carry over. They'll use that to pay for it, plus just general revenue growth above what they anticipate spending in the current 2-year budget. They are not offering a great deal of expanded funding for a lot of areas. I mean, they're giving more to Medicaid almost because they have to, but they're not giving a lot more to schools, local governments, and other areas, at least at this point. So that's keeping the spending down, and it does free up the money for that tax cut.
Is the fracking tax dead?
The oil industry is one. I mean, every single time it's going to keep coming up. Even at the governor's proposal, it was still like the third lowest in the country. It seems outrageous that we have this industry and we can't tax it, and that tells you the power of lobbying.
The oil and gas people got pretty much everything they wanted from the House version, and we'll see if they can maintain it on the Senate side. But it wasn't just the taxes and fees. They also won on regulations about where they can dispose of brine. They won on, there were some regulations that were basically some right to know for landowners. They're leasing their property to oil and gas drillers, and those are gone. So they've, across the board, they got what they wanted.
And the sales tax expansion, Mark, do you see that any portion of that being resurrected as the Senate takes theirs and as the governor negotiates with both chambers?
I don't. I'd be surprised. I think the sales tax expansion was one of the less popular things out there. People didn't like the idea of having to pay more on services and things that they're already paying for. I think that's dead.
So what happened? I mean, I'm all for intra-party debate because I think it fosters some good policy making. But in this case, the governor and the legislature seem so far apart, Mark. Have you ever seen something like this before? And what's behind it, do you think?
Well, I see it almost every year. You look at any legislature in action, the majority party people think is monolithic, but there's almost no majority party that's monolithic. A lot of big disputes in the Democratic Party in Washington, who controls the Senate. You see them differing over approaches. So we have strong personalities in our party with strong opinions. But most of them are saying there needs to be tax relief. And that's one thing that you see as a common thread through all of this.
What's interesting, though, is where are they going? What's the end game on tax relief? There's two schools of thought. One is we need to lower the overall rates as much as possible every year to get it down to zero ultimately. The
income tax rates.
The income tax rates. The other school of thought is let's give these tax cuts to business owners because they may use it to create jobs. So there's a little tension there. It'll be interesting to see where they end up.
All right. Ohio's 2 U.S. senators this week moved to the far right and the far left of their parties, at least on these couple of issues. U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, a Democrat, openly disagreed with President Obama's budget, which would reduce future Social Security benefits. And Senator Rob Portman joined with conservative Republicans in trying to block a debate on a bill that would require background checks for just about all gun sales. Brian Rothenberg, 64% in a poll in February favored cost of living changes to Social Security. 64% of Americans, but yet Sherrod Brown is diametrically opposed.
Well,
to
you
it.
ask a senior, and you're not going to get the same answer, and it depends how you ask the question. Here's what Sherrod Brown is saying: you don't have to do it through a cost of living increase. There's a cap, and that cap can be lifted and set higher, which would do the very same thing with Social Security, which just means that if you're paying Social Security tax right now, I think it's about $119,000, and then after that, you don't pay it. And what Sherrod's saying is just lift it. If you lift it, it's solvent, and it it doesn't hurt senior citizens who are already on fixed incomes. So that's kind of the crux of that argument.
But we're talking, most people are saying it's like maybe $30 a month that this would cost senior citizens.
You talk to some seniors, and $30 a month is a lot of money for these folks. I mean, they've got very fixed incomes, especially if they didn't have a lot of savings, especially with some of the ways that pension funds have been wiped out. And so you're talking about the difference in some cases of cost of living, of medicine, things like that for some of these folks.
It would save $230 million in the federal budget. Mark, is this enough to get Republicans to give a bit on revenue, tax increases?
Don't know. But what I do know is we have to have an adult conversation about how to make sure Social Security is viable, because everybody knows it's not. And folks in Washington don't like having that conversation. We're starting to see the pains of division about that.
At the State House, state lawmakers, when they look at entitlements, I mean, there's not Medicaid is the only entitlement that the state is responsible for, but do you see the same resistance to do anything on the part of Democrats to cut back on entitlements at all?
I think the same philosophical differences that you see in D.C. about where we should go with entitlements, spending cuts versus tax increases. You can apply it in Columbus as well, and that's why we see the pushback on the Medicaid expansion and the push for tax cuts.
I did find it interesting, Obama's budget. He kind of got hit from the far right and the far left, which was uncommon. Normally, he has not been taking flack from his own side on his proposals, but this I think he did kind of make some effort to at least put out a budget that could be a talk, to start talking about. Doing things that reducing the Social Security payments and things that the left and his party is not going to like. It was interesting that when I think it was Representative Greg Walden from Oregon, he's the House GOP campaign chairman, came out. He blasted the plan, saying this is going to be bad for seniors. Speaker John Boehner came right out and said, "Whoa, I don't agree with that. You can't have it both ways. You can't beat up Obama because he's not doing entitlement reform and then beat him up when he does." So John Boehner, I think, was smart to get out in front of that. And I think maybe we, like Mark said, we can start finally talking like adults.
Were Republicans surprised, Mark, that there were? I mean, he's promised entitlement reform. It's been on his website, but now it's in the budget. It's on paper. He's put a stake in the ground, to use the business lingo. Were they surprised by the proposals to cut entitlements?
Nobody on the Republican side takes much of what President Obama is doing seriously, because they think he's still in campaign mode, where he's continuing to raise money for a new campaign arm. He wants to win back in the House. He wants to preserve his legacy. And most Republicans in Washington don't find what he's doing to be credible. They think he's really just in campaign mode full time.
Brian, will Democrats say, okay, we'll give a little bit on Social Security if we can get the taxes?
I don't think so on this one. I really think unless, it might be part of a grand bargain, but I've got to tell you, Social Security is really solvent until 2039 right now. And in terms of cost of living and how difficult it is on seniors already, I think this is kind of a line on the sand kind of thing for a lot of Democrats. So if it's a grand bargain, it might take some Republican votes. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't have a discussion on the Hill, but there's just other ways to do this. There really are.
I'll just say, as someone who's planning to retire in 2037, that does not make me feel very good.
That's right. Moving to the gun legislation that was put before the Senate this week, Rob Portman joined 30 senators in trying to block it by having a filibuster. Mark Weaver, almost 90% of Americans want background checks on gun sales. Why did Rob Portman try to block this legislation?
Well, he said why. What he said was that the legislation that was being moved was not the compromise bill. It was the Democrat bill. Remember, there are Democrats in the Senate who, when I give my shotgun to my son, as my will, wants my son to have to get a background check for that. Most Americans oppose that. Rob Portman said he'd be more in favor of what Senator Manchin, Democrat, West Virginia, and Senator Toomey, Republican, Pennsylvania, have put together as a compromise measure. And I think Rob was expressing his concern that rather than move the compromise, they were moving the more liberal bill.
But there were other conservative senators who saw past that and said, okay, let's have the debate. I might vote against it. There were Democrats who said that as well. Does it put him on the far right on the gun issue, where he may not possibly be?
I don't think so. I mean, Rob's a gun owner, and he's certainly a hunter and a strong Second Amendment record. But he also understands that there are things that we can agree on that we could fix. Strengthening the law on straw purchasers. There's a lot of things we could do. Number one of which is to enforce the gun laws we have. The president has the ability to tell his U.S. attorneys to indict every gun criminal in their districts and ask for no plea bargains, and we'd send thousands of gun criminals to prison every year. The president has chosen not to do that. He's campaigning on this instead.
Wait a minute. First of all, the Toomey bill, the whole bill, the Manchin-Toomey compromise, is going to be put in next week. The vote was actually about whether they could proceed in order to amend the bill to be able to put the Manchin-Toomey thing in there. So that wasn't the case. Second of all, turning this around on President Obama is ridiculous. This is the first gun legislation that they have had in Washington, D.C. since 1994. And finally, when it comes to this legislation, it was 61 members of the United States Senate. When was the last time that we actually saw in a divisive piece that you actually had Republicans crossing over in those numbers to allow debate on something like this? And it's really simple. It's because of what happened and has been happening. It's because people are fed up with the gridlock on something after Newtown, and it's because they want to see action. 92% of the people approve of this. So I think Rob Portman really made a mistake here. I mean, Toomey and some of these other folks, they were allowing debate. McCain allowed debate. Why Rob Portman did this is beyond me.
Do you see Rob Portman voting for a bill that allows for individual, neighbors selling a gun to a neighbor, a father selling a gun to a son without a background check? Do you see Rob Portman supporting that and eliminate the gun show loophole?
Maybe. I mean, that's what he's saying, that his objections to this bill that they're sending to the floor was over that the background checks were too strict and there wasn't enough wiggle room for things like inheriting a gun from your grandfather or whatever. So we'll see. And what's interesting to me is that even though this was like a really big vote, it's a tiny little step.
Yeah.
They still have to debate it on the floor, amend it on the floor, figure out whether or not they like it, not like it, and then it has to go through the House. So we're a long ways off from anything actually getting to Obama's desk for signature.
All right. Our final topic this week marks the 20th anniversary of the Lucasville prison riot. Inmates took control of the Southern Ohio prison for 11 days. 1 guard and 9 inmates were killed during the uprising, blamed primarily on overcrowding. Laura Bischoff, this was it captured our attention for those 11 days. It lasted for weeks and months, even years after that, the impact of it. But are our prisons now in a better shape, in a better condition than they were back 20 years ago?
It's hard to say because 20 years is a long window, and in that time, DRC has made changes. They added 4,000 security cameras. They got another 1,000 on order. They built the Supermax Penitentiary up in Youngstown, which is for the worst of the worst. Yeah. There's no more double bunking of maximum security inmates, but you still have a lot of overcrowding. You still have 50,000 inmates in a system designed for 40,000. We're now at 130% of capacity. In January of '93, just a couple months before the riot broke out, they were at 146% of capacity. So they were more overcrowded then, and maybe they didn't have as many safety measures in place. For example, the guard stations, they were out in the open. The inmates had free weights and baseball bats and all kinds of other things that they used as weapons. A lot of that has been taken away. So yes, no, but there's still a big problem with gangs and with violence. And Gary Moore has been trying to address these things. He's introduced this 3-tiered system where he'd have like the worst, the hardcore guys, and then the middlecore guys, and then the guys who are soon to go home, and lesser restraints on them.
Bottom line is, prisons are always going to be dangerous places. Can we ever fully prevent guarantee this? Something like this never happens again?
There's never a guarantee, and certainly the harsher you make the conditions or the stronger the security is, the more lawsuits there are by ACLU and prisoners' rights groups. So we need to find that balance where the people who work there, and the other prisoners, frankly, are safe from violence, but it's an expensive proposition. That's always been the sticking point.
The fact of the matter is, it is overcrowded. There are a lot of instances where some of these prison workers are having their issues. Prison privatization is causing other problems where some of the more minimum security are going to those private prisons and the more hardcore in other areas, and that's going to continue to shift some of the problems that we're having. We're going through a period of transition, and sometimes it does feel like we've forgotten what happened 20 years ago. And I say this as my great uncle used to run the Ohio prison system from the 30s through the 60s, and I think 130% is a scary number.
Jim, the but with sentencing reform now going the other way. It was get tough on crime. Now there seems to be a feeling that let's try to get some of these lower level offenders out into other types of programs.
Right, because when you're talking about incarceration, you're talking, as Mark said, big money. And lawmakers don't like to spend big money on this system, and they're trying to find ways to reduce the costs, and that's the trend we're seeing, and I think we're probably going to continue to see that as we go along. I don't think there's forever. I know there's always occasionally there's bills that come out that are pushing for tougher sentences and tougher punishments, but I think it's more so now being offset because of that 130%. Rate. The lawmakers realize that if they get a big prison riot like that on their watch, when they were, they can't sit around and say, "Well, we didn't realize that it was that full." Well, they do realize it, and so they're trying to look for ways to.
All right, we got to get to our off-the-record comments. Mark Weaver up first.
This weekend at the State House, youth from all around Ohio are participating in the YMCA Youth in Government Model Legislature, acting out the roles of legislators. It's a great program. It's the only one the YMCA does here. And if you're interested in government, as I was, I got involved through that. Encourage your kids to get involved with the YMCA Youth in Government program.
Let's hope it's not as divided as.
No, we could learn a lot from watching the kids in the YMCA program.
All right, Brian.
I think over the next week you're going to find that the initial numbers came out on the education funding issue, and the next spreadsheets are going to come out. Right now it only looks like there's some flat funded, about 160 or 170 different districts, but because they played some games, I think you're going to see that once you take transportation and some other costs out, about 130 more districts are flat funded.
Jim.
Actually, I was going to talk about that too. School funding. You went from a governor's plan where he had to put $900 million into it just so 2/3 of or 60% of the districts didn't lose money. Then you go to the House plan; they capped funding at 6%, and so there's about $1.6 billion not being spent under their plan because of caps. So you went from one end of the spectrum to the other. I'm not sure how much is one. I've talked to lawmakers who don't really think one's better than the other.
Laura, real quick.
And the Michigan Wolverines did not win the national championship, but I did win a 6-pack of beer from Mike Thompson when Michigan beat Syracuse, and I will enjoy it thoroughly.
Yes, I lost a couple bets because of my rooting for Syracuse over Michigan last week. I joined the Buckeyes and rooted against Michigan, and see how it paid off for me? So now I know how Buckeye fans feel. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter, where you can continue the conversation. Also see streaming video of each show at WOSU.org. For our panel, for our crew, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.